Whether you're a life coach, therapist, biohacker, invested in wellness, or in the healthcare profession, if you have an intention to work in psychedelic spaces, you're in the right place then. If you're called, get involved. But first, get informed. Let's talk the 4 N's: intake, intention, in-space integration, leading to deeper transformations. Psychedelic Coach Podcast, Tah, Kole. Walk you through the process, it's all possible. Leave space for the follow-through. Most importantly, integration is
all right,
not
y'all.
optional.
Welcome to the Psychedelic Coach
Podcast.
So, we're both here today.
It's been a while, girl.
Just the two of us. We can make it if we try.
Just the two of us.
It's beautiful.
No, it was too high. Yeah. It's been a while, girl.
It's been a long while, and it's time.
Way past time.
Yeah.
So I'm glad to be here with you today.
Prove it. Excellent. So, y'all, things are changing around here as they tend to do.
Yeah.
If you've been here, you already know. Especially if you've been here like 10 years.
It's the nature of our whole existence is shifting and changing.
It's true. We're Robin Leslie Schiff in here right now. They're master coaches if you don't know now. So, y'all, so here's kind of what's I'm going to give the breakdown of what we're doing around chill. We want to go deeper, and people want us to go deeper into a lot of the concepts and I would say Condor concepts, and also just conversations around safety and accessibility and other conversations that we have at the Condor Approach Live that we're going to start translating more here on the digital stage, we'll say.
Yeah, we want you to be able to have an opportunity to learn about these things, even if you don't come to the event. And one of the things that we really talk about and stress is that we want this information to be accessible. And if long form content is what you desire, then come get it at the podcast.
So here's what we are going to do. We're going to also be adding video, y'all. So we're going to start having YouTube videos of the entire interviews and shorter form, we'll say lessons, 5 to 10 minute videos on YouTube for the podcast, and actually making it a video podcast and doing 2 podcasts a month right now instead of 4. So doing longer form and going deeper. So should we kick it off? Shall we kick it off?
We're kicking it off, man.
We're
kicking it off.
We're kick it. Okay,
Kicking
so
it off.
I feel like then we have to, we got to go from the very beginning, which is like the bedrock. We've talked about it many times, but it's been a long time since we really went deep with it together. And that's on safety.
Yeah.
You down to rock with me on some safety today?
Girl, I'm here for it. Safety is the cornerstone. It's the bedrock. It's the foundation. It's the poverty line of all of the work that we do.
Mm-hmm. Which I'm going to come back because I want you to explain that once we get a little bit further into this. And so as we kick it off, before we even go into kind of looping things together, let's talk about what safety is and then personal examples of feeling safe or not feeling safe.
Well, safety is an amazing thing that is a very individualized sport that you can play on a team, but it's a very individualized, unique circumstance of each individual person on this planet and then us collectively. And it is the absence of hurt, harm, loss, deficit, injury, death, and pain. All of those things. Safety is freedom from those things. And one of the things that has been the biggest challenge for the people in our community is really understanding and recognizing what safety is on an individual basis. Whenever we do workshops, we ask people, what is safety to you? And there's all these different definitions. So if I'm talking to you about something and somebody else is talking about something else, but we're using the same word, we can have a lot of confusion and clashing and conflict.
I think the time it became most prevalent was last February at Condor when there was so many people that didn't actually even know that they weren't safe. And they had this idea of like, oh, find a safe space. Oh, this is a safe space. And the context of safety is so misunderstood, and the different layers of safety and the ways you could feel unsafe. And so like when I rewind back, being like 6 years into my journey on the psychedelic and my personal transformation path, we'll say, I remember, first of all, just not feeling safe in a psychedelic experience in a healing capacity, and that'll be a story for another day. But there was a pinnacle moment, Tah, when people kept coming up to us and saying, hey, will you hold space for me? And I kept thinking, like, there's no way. Like, there's I'm on my healing journey. I haven't healed enough to help other people. And I'm 6 years in at that point. And I watch people after one experience be like, yeah, I can help people. That was not me. Okay. I knew that I had a lot to deconstruct and understand. And I remember like waiting for that moment, whether it was from God or from ayahuasca or from whoever, that I was looking for signs of like, oh no, you have to wait. I haven't been shamanized. Like I'm waiting to be knighted or something by ayahuasca. And I hear a lot of people share this perspective of not feeling ready to hold space or facilitate. And I realize in retrospect, that was a safety thing. I did not feel safe to hold space for other people. I didn't feel equipped. I didn't feel knowledgeable. I didn't feel like I would know what to do if they hit a tricky, sticky situation. And that was the beginning of starting to understand, one, like what things I did know that were really valuable and that could help people. And also then the signs that you and I had been facilitating people in other people's groups for a long time, for years, for month after month. And it's also who we are as people. We've been coaches and supporters our whole life, but there was this point where I was like, yeah, but who am I? Like, I haven't healed enough. I don't know enough. At that point, I was like 30 years old. You know what I'm saying? It was just like, but I don't have the skill sets and the knowledge. And finally, in one of my own ceremonies, I asked like, yeah, but how will I know when it's time, or how do I find a teacher that gives me permission to start to hold these experiences? And what I saw in that ceremony was, what more evidence do you need than all of the people that are coming to you because they feel safe with you? And it was my own not feeling safe, not them. And so the next phase of that was starting to understand vulnerability, which we'll talk more about the differences between the two. But I hear so often people that say, I don't feel like I've healed enough to help other people, or I'm not ready yet, or maybe in a couple years. It's not really how it works. We've got to find some middle ground where we can help people exactly where we are, because you're further along than someone. We can't all wait until this like nirvana place that we can finally turn and help people, because I haven't found that place. I don't know if you have. Actually, no, I did find it for about a minute and a half in the jungle in about 2015. 20,000. Nice. I jumped into the future, y'all, and brought it back. But I got bored after a minute and a half of nirvana. Anyway. But as I started to really ask myself the question, like, okay, but then what is it in me? And expressing to people, like, I don't feel safe to hold space for you. And it was the transparency that made them feel safe. It was the honesty that made them feel safe. It was me saying, I can't guide you in some shamanic realm. I can make sure that if you need a Kleenex, I got you. And that was really the beginning of it. It was like there was no one else there for the job for them. There was no one else they felt safe enough with to go to the places that they wanted to go within themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's when I started to see like, oh, it's not actually about me knowing everything. It's that there were some people that felt safer with me than with anyone else, and that would allow them to go within themselves and find the answers, not me needing to have all the answers. So I think the general rule of thumb is when I hear someone say, I don't think I'm ready, they're probably more ready than the people that say, I don't need any more support or coaching or understanding in the space. I know it all are usually the ones that I'm more concerned about. So for you, in learning about safety and coming into this space, where did you start to learn about safety within this space for you? Because I feel like that's when we really started to study it.
Well, safety for me came online in my psychedelic experiences, but from my psychedelic experiences, I had found the first safe place that I had ever found in my life, in community, in ceremonies, in a loft somewhere in some city. I didn't feel safe in my life. And when I finally found a space that was safe and I could explore and I could move beyond the dramas and the traumas and the lying, I didn't feel safe to express my truth. I finally found some place I could express my truth. And then when I stepped outside of the journey space around psychedelics and the communities around that, I went to speak with my friends and I didn't feel safe to share with them. They were very judgmental for the most part. Not everybody, most part. My family, no way. There was no way I was talking to my family, my blood relatives, about psychedelics. There's no way. The judgment, you're using drugs, all of these things.
Yeah, and the medical background is there's a lot to it too.
Well,
Plus
that's
Brooklyn.
yeah, that's the next thing I'm gonna say. When I was in a hospital, I wanted to, like, people were like, "Man, you're really different. Everything's different about you. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to put my finger on it, but you're different." And I wanted to be like, "Hey, man, I had these psychedelic experiences," and I'm at the hospital and I didn't feel safe. And so, what was threatened? My career was threatened. My money was threatened. So I was in a space of being hurt by being disconnected, my reputation being harmed, losing finances, losing my license, my nursing license, being not able to pay my bills, which is deficit. And then my reputation could be injured. And so, and in that space, I was in pain. And so all of these spaces, I wasn't feeling safe. I was not feeling safe. I wasn't feeling safe to be myself. I wasn't feeling safe to express myself. And this was a big repeat of everything that was happening before I had psychedelics. And so what I had to learn was how to actually craft safety in all of these environments, not just in the psychedelic experiences. And what happened was, one of the journeys I went into, one of my intention was to actually explore this space, my fears and my safety spaces and all of this. And what came up for me was these ideas around what safety is, so I could define it for myself, so I know how to craft that. I knew how to get the environment to cooperate with that. I knew how to open myself up into a space of vulnerability, right? The importance of safety is something that I can't stress enough. It's not a thing in the future. Safety is a very moment of now thing, right? I am safe right now. I am free from hurt, free from harm, free from loss, free from deficit, free from injury, free from death, free from pain right now. And if I'm not, how do I get out of that space? That's my strategy. Security is the idea of safety in the future. And that's what most people are thinking about. And that's what I was thinking about. Well, will I be safe if my family knows about this? Well, will I be safe if I say this? When in reality, right now, I am, for the most part, we are in the moment of safe, in a safe space in the moment. And if we don't perceive ourselves as safe, are we projecting a future idea right now that's keeping us from feeling safe? That's a challenge space. And so in that, I had to learn to become vulnerable. I had to learn to open myself up. And a big part of safety is understanding what vulnerability means. And a huge part of we've had this dance with a lot of people around what vulnerability is. And people that say, well, vulnerability means I'm open to be hurt. I'm open to be harmed. I'm open to have things taken from me. I'm open for all of these things to happen. The answer to that is yes. But it's also, I'm open for love. I'm open for connection. I'm open for possibility. And so for us at the Condor approach, vulnerability is open with possibility. And that possibility includes the yummy stuff. It includes the yucky stuff as well. Knowing how to set up boundaries is really important when we talk about safety. And I feel like, well, I know that most people don't have any idea how to set up boundaries. It's not something we're taught in school. It's not something that we're taught to find intricacies of by our parents. And in that space, learning how to create filters of vulnerability, right? Those are bound. Your filters of vulnerability are boundaries. Hey, I don't want you to touch me. Right? Being able to say that is setting a boundary, but somebody just coming in and touching you and you're not knowing how to turn that off, you don't have a clear boundary around that. And many times we're not taught these things, and we're not taught how to create our safety in the moment because we're not taught how to create boundaries that serve us to let things in vulnerably when we choose, and to let things out vulnerably when we choose. When we let information in, be that touch information, be that verbal information, be that watching television, when we let information in, we allow ourselves to be changed by that information. And so when we let things out, we allow the environment to be changed by the information we let out. So we have boundaries on the incoming, boundaries on the outgoing. And many times, if people are not saying their truth, right, people pleasing is a big thing with safety. If people are not letting their information out, they may perceive that they won't be safe if their information is let out. They may perceive that somebody else won't be safe if they let their information out. So they hold their information and they have a tight boundary around that space. And so sometimes we have these dysfunctional boundaries that we create around vulnerability. And that's a big deal for us.
Mm-hmm. I see a common maybe what's the word I'm looking for? It's almost like acted out vulnerability. Anyone that's been to psychedelic experiences or journeys or ceremonies, you might see that in a circle, people are crying and they call that vulnerability. When for me, you can cry without being vulnerable at all. So it's almost like there's a misconception that I'm seeing and that a lot of people think is vulnerability when it may not be. I know for myself personally, there were times in my life that my fawning was crying to give people the remorse or what they wanted so that I could get out of a situation. And so this idea that emoting is vulnerable is also like this common theme that I see in psychedelic spaces. And then it's almost like there's almost like an acting that starts to happen, and not that it's even intentional, but that people are starting to emote because in order for me to belong here, I need to emote. And so for my safety around belonging in this community to be fortified, then I need to emote. I need to share my emotions and cry and whatever, which for me, when something's truly vulnerable and deep with that possibility for change, you can't get to it right away. And when we attended larger group ceremonies, I'm talking 40 plus people, there was, in order to maintain the safety of time and all the people in the room to get out on time, they would have time limitations on the shares. But it has not been my experience that to get to the true vulnerable spaces, it can be done in a couple minutes. That it actually requires a level of space for someone to feel safe enough that they will be able to take the time that they need to take to be in the process that they need to be in. Like I remember being at one ceremony, and I know you're going to remember this one, that we went to go co-facilitate for the morning after. And one of the gentlemen that was there shared that their best friend had died. And it was the first time he'd said it out loud. And then the timer went off to go to the next person. And I watched in their body and their nervous system shut down and pull it back in. And those kind of moments, it's like as a facilitator, that was such a rich opportunity for them to actually like work with it. And when they shut down like that, it could be years before that's accessible again, because when that true vulnerability comes out, it's almost like a wounded animal emerging from a cave, and suddenly it got overwhelmed with attention or with, oh, we've got to move on. So that person's not safe. Their information's not safe. And so I love what you were explaining with safety, that it's a moment of now thing. Someone could say intellectually, yeah, I'm safe, but his information in that moment wasn't safe. The time wasn't safe. So then his physical body, actually harm was created from that. And it's not that we can protect everyone from everything. We can't. But that's also the point, is we can't create safety in totality for someone else. We can create an environment for it to be explored, but their thoughts, their past, their experiences, their beliefs, if someone is of the LDS or Mormon faith and their beliefs get challenged, then their idea of being with their family in the afterlife is not safe. So there's all these constructs and beliefs, and the intricacies of it are so vast that when most people are talking about safety, they're talking about freedom from physical harm, or maybe like the elements, or we'll keep you safe, no one's going to hit you. But you have to understand the 7 attributes of violence in like the vastness of it, which is why at the Condor approach, we harp on it and we talk about it. And it's an individual sport first. Like you have to first know what makes me safe, what makes me feel unsafe, because our events prove it, that we build it on a foundation of safety for ourselves first. Because if we don't feel safe, there is nowhere to build from there.
Never. There's never a place to build if we're not safe. It's the bedrock. It's the cornerstone of existence. If we're not safe, then something is threatened. Something about us is threatened, and then wholeness gets disrupted. Anything that is violent is a disruption of wholeness, period. That's how we look at it at the Condor approach. And this is what we're looking to support people in understanding what violence is. Violence isn't just punching somebody. Violence is the dismantling of a person's body by punching them. And the punch is an action. And what happens is when a person gets hit, it's violent. When a person is menaced and their idea of themselves becomes threatened, that is violence, and that stops a person from being whole. And when a person is not whole, they are in a space where they're not safe. And that's why the 7 attributes of violence come in: hurt, harm, loss, deficit, injury, death, pain. All of those things disrupt the person from being whole. Somebody said to me, well, how does that stop somebody from being whole? I'm like, you're not connected to life on the planet anymore. You're disrupted.
This matter has been disrupted.
As a human organism, families are disrupted. All of these things happen when somebody dies. And so it's a very important space to consider. These are all really important points. And there was something that you said earlier that I wanted to bring it back to, with the person that was crying and vulnerability, and the idea of emoting as a space of vulnerability. Crying for me is not an emotion. It's a behavior. And many times we have anchored crying to emotion, which a lot of times it is. Many times crying is anchored to emotion. Sometimes it's not. You get some wind in your face and some dust, crying, it's a thing that can happen. And it's an activity, it's a behavior of the human organism. Sometimes it's attached to emotion, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's how we express emotion through us, sometimes it's not. But when we anchor that and we put a meaning on it and we look at somebody and we say, oh, this person's crying, they're vulnerable. Yes, right? Yes, and. So they're allowing us to see them cry. That is a form of vulnerability. They're open to let us see them cry. And what else is behind that? Yeah. Are they allowing the openness of the crying to let out whatever it is that they need to let out, and let in whatever it is that they need to let in, or could benefit or shift or change them into a different space? I don't know.
I love that you just said that, Tah, and it's something I don't know if we've even really talked about very much at the Condor Approach Live, so I'm happy it's coming up here, is around the difference between emotions and behaviors. Because so much of projections and insertions, which we'll get into on a whole other episode, and we've talked about in the past if you go look at old podcast episodes. But if I see that someone's crying and I assume it's because they're sad, that is a projection of emotion versus acknowledging the behavior. I don't know if they just stubbed their toe. And they might not be sad. They might be hurt. They might be frustrated. They might, whatever the case could be, but the behavior and really detaching that from the emotion is really important, because they always say like, oh, the strong ones, right? Or the nice guy. All of those are behaviors, not emotions or how someone handles emotions. Because a person that one person might call stoic might actually be shut down, where really stoicism could be there navigating all of their emotions more effectively versus not having emotions. And the meaning and the words and then the thoughts that really cause us to feel the way that we feel beyond that is behaviors. It's like when we talk about in state assessments, this all builds on top of each other. Even if the live event was 30 straight days, we wouldn't even touch or scratch the surface of this stuff.
Not even close.
Whether it's on safety or anything. What was another key time for you that as a facilitator or as a nurse, you witnessed a situation where someone was not safe and it was very clear to you and you felt like no one else really either noticed or knew what to do, even if they did notice?
Well, there's plenty of times in the hospital where I was working with somebody and they would be sharing something with me and they couldn't share it with the doctor.
Like what?
Well, people come in with venereal, the symptoms, sexually transmitted infection symptoms, maybe some kind of drainage or some kind of discharge from their genitalia, and particularly males, right? I'm a male, and so they would come in and they would share something with me, but they wouldn't share it with the female nurses because there's a shame element, and they did not feel safe, maybe because of their relationships with, I don't know, I could broadcast all types of projections as to why they wouldn't share it, but they didn't feel safe. And so they would tell me one thing, and then if a female doctor came in, they would tell the doctor something else. And so what I would do is, if the doctor that was assigned to this person was female, I would have to go in and be like, hey, I'd like a male doctor. And if there was no male doctor on, I'd be like, hey, can I chaperone while this person is in here, because they don't feel safe to express to female bodies, apparently, because this story is changing from person to person. And if that's the case, then the person is not going to get the treatment that they want. And this is problematic when we involve shame in a dynamic where somebody's looking to get help.
And we see that happen in psychedelics too,
Mm-hmm.
where people are afraid to give more of the information. We've worked with people with HIV. We've worked with people with other types of sexual things that they don't want to share. We've worked with people with past cancers they didn't want to talk about
Mm-hmm.
because of where it was located.
Mm-hmm.
We've had people that in so many places and spaces, I've heard coaches and people say, if someone lies to me, then I'd cut them off. When we recognize a lie is to protect something.
Yeah.
And there's something that doesn't feel safe, which is why the lie. They're either afraid, hey, if I tell this facilitator that I'm on this medication, they won't let me sit. Or if I tell them I'm on this medication that's for HIV, then they're not going to let me be in the group or whatever. And the intricacies of it are so, like, it's so much.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand why people are reluctant to get in this space. And that's why I value so much people that continue to learn the way that we do.
Mm-hmm.
That the more I learn, the less I know. You know what I'm saying? Where it's just the infinite possibilities between gender and culture and religion and people that have been in the prison complex system, people that have been in the military, people that were honorably discharged and not honorably discharged. Like it's a lot, bro.
Yeah, it's a ton. We did a whole episode on lying. It's called, I think it's called Liar or Liar. This was like 3 years ago.
Totally.
And it was a really great episode. It's still one of my favorites. And the thing is, when a person lies, like, I used to lie about everything. I've said it on this podcast 1,000,000 times. I used to lie about everything because I was not safe. I did not feel safe with my information going out. I felt like my information was going to bring me back an onslaught of pain and punishment and people saying things that would hurt me, disconnection, which is a form of loss and deficit. Like all of these things, I was terrified. And if you think that there are times now where the idea of lying doesn't come into my psyche, it does, but I move around it because I've learned to move around it. I know the benefit of being honest, even when it's uncomfortable. I know the benefit of being honest. And so anybody who's lying, anybody who says anything to me that is dishonest or inauthentic, I know that there's a protective mechanism online, and this is a safety issue. This is a safety mechanism that's coming online. So I don't fault a person. I may not like it, but I don't fault the person. And if a person's not being honest with me, I don't call them a liar, because when I do that, I'm now assaulting their identity, which makes me an unsafe person for them.
Yeah.
So what I could do is be like, hey, I just want to check in because things are not lining up for me. And I'd like some clarity. Are you down for clarity? I always use consent. I always lean into, are you down for it? Because if they're not down for it, and I say, well, this doesn't seem right, I think that you're lying, then I'm moving past the boundary that they've set up, which is the lie. The lie is their form of boundary. That's what they've learned. And if their boundary is a disruptive space for all of us, then there are ways around it. But I have to know how to be skilled about moving around that boundary. And that's one of the most important spaces.
That communication piece is everything. We talk a lot about confronting and having the tough conversations. And a lot of people, I watch them misinterpret that, or the way that they interpret that is that you go at something head on with aggression versus head on direct, a very masculine approach to be direct, because that safety piece, they feel assaulted, so they return the assault. They bring that violence back, the 7 attributes of violence, right? Hurt, harm, loss, deficit, injury, death, pain. They get injured, and so they react to the injury on their identity. It's like we watch people who have government names that if someone calls them their government name, that is an assault on their new identity or who they believe themselves to be and who they're creating. And so when it is assaulted in that identity, the protective mechanism, anger, comes online and looks like the behaviors of aggression, of going after someone, of whatever. And people will fight to the death for honor over who they believe themselves to be, or who their religion believes them to be, or their country, or all of these things. And that is the power of this harm mechanism and these 7 attributes of violence. Is then it starts to make a lot of sense why people react and act the way that they do, which makes you more equipped to recognize when someone's not feeling safe. And at what layer Like, we couldn't even get into it today, which is why we teach it at the Condor Approach Live, is around the logic ceiling. We have these different layers of logic within the system that if they contract all the way down or shut down or get into that very reactive space, it is because they don't feel safe, and you're not going to get any idea in, let alone bridging, changing some like big systemic issue. And most activists, the reason that they're not effective for change is they are fighting back versus learning how to confront and have the communication and understanding what deeper things so that we can influence change.
Well, therein lies the difference between conflict and confrontation.
Yes.
Right. Well, conflict is a form of confrontation, but it's a violent confrontation. And so confronting something is when I put something in front of you, right? Hey, listen, this doesn't line up for me. I'm a little confused. This isn't lining up for me. Could you help me to understand? Is different than you're a liar.
Right.
It's different than you're a liar and you're stupid and I don't
know what you're talking
and I
about.
don't trust you and I'm going to punish you and I'm not going to talk to you and I'll never trust you again. That is putting a person into a space where they don't feel safe, and that is a conflict space. And when we're in conflict, we never get to the end of it because we're constantly in a violent space. Conflict requires violence.
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to say this again. Conflict requires violence. That's it. Confrontation does not require violence. Confrontation is putting something in front of you. Now, it may be uncomfortable. It's still confrontation. It may be wonderful. It's still confrontation. How many times have you heard somebody say, oh man, somebody said I love you and I just shrunk?
Yeah.
It's a confrontational space. And somebody saying I love you can also be an assault on somebody's idea of safety. And so that can be a conflict space for a person. It all depends on how we value things. And that's a value dynamic space. And I'm going to teach about that down the road because that conflict dynamics is a very important space that I believe once people understand it, they can't un-understand it.
Yeah. That's a whole weekend with Tah well, everything that you talk about is a whole weekend with Tah situation. But this safety piece, y'all, like so many people can't even tell you what makes them feel safe and what doesn't. But anyone in a relationship knows when their partner doesn't feel safe, whether it's the finances get low, there's no one to watch the kids, you want to go on vacation, your credit cards are too high, your credit score, all of those things. If someone is reactive, they probably don't feel safe. So we have the layers of if someone comes on a retreat or they're going to Costa Rica and they've only got $5,000 in their bank account and the retreat's $5,000, their finances are not safe. So going into the psychedelic experience, they could have too much riding on that breakthrough that if it doesn't take their safety, they could go down below the poverty line, which I'd love for you to explain now with safety. And because they needed something to work so desperately that they put their financial safety so far out there that they are now potentially falling under that poverty line financially, literally, because they spent every dime thinking it might heal, solve, fix, whatever, and it didn't.
Right. Thank you for asking me about the poverty line. The poverty line is an interesting space that I started teaching in Emotional, and it is the bedrock. It's the foundation of what keeps us whole. When we are unsafe, we become dismantled. We are not whole. If we are subject to hurt, harm, loss, deficit, injury, death, pain, there's something about us that it becomes unwhole. And so when we don't have wholeness, or we don't have the resources to be whole or to maintain wholeness, that is when we fall below the poverty line. So if you look at safety is the poverty line. Anytime a person is unable to pay for their stuff, unable to have a place to live, unable to feel like somebody's going to come take all their things away, unable to feel like they have shelter from animals, shelter from the elements and all of that, that's where we start to fall below the poverty line. Now, there are people who can live out in the street that don't feel impoverished. They don't feel impoverished. They are not below the poverty line because they know how to keep themselves safe. They know how to maintain themselves in the space that they're in. When I was in nursing, there were people that came to the hospital that didn't want to have a home. They were like, there's too much involved in it. I'm not interested in it. I'm good in the streets.
They
I know my way.
Unsafe because of the stress of like the responsibility and obligation.
No, but they didn't feel unsafe at all.
No, I'm saying like they felt unsafe in the idea of having a home
Yeah.
and having all those
Oh, the
bills
system.
and
Yeah,
all that.
yeah. The system was
Made
what
them
was
feel
the
unsafe.
system was the unsafe space,
Yeah.
and so they learned how to manipulate the environment, use people, get money and finances or whatever it is to keep themselves in a space where they felt whole. And these were not people that were smelling funky and dirty or anything like that. That is traditionally attributed to people that were undomiciled or didn't have homes. And so there are people who can be in that space and not feel impoverished.
So it's like the choice to be unhoused versus someone that is. It's like if we were to create two positions here, we could say there's people who choose not to have a house, and there's people who don't have a home, where it's almost like an emotional component that the home is a place that they feel safe. Where some people can be unhoused and feel totally safe because of the freedom that affords and not being a part of the matrix. We'll say.
And being completely off grid.
Yeah.
And there are some people that I spoke to that would like if it was raining or if it was really cold outside, they'd come to the hospital and they'd hang out in the waiting room, and I'd chat with them. In between, if it ever got slow, no, buy them a sandwich. We had sandwiches. I'd give them a sandwich. And some of the other nurses would get bent out of shape. Oh, if you give them a sandwich, they're going to come back. Well, what do we have these sandwiches for? Let's feed the people that are hungry, please. Thank you. And this was part of it. And they knew how to come to the hospital, when to come to the hospital, how to get resources. If they were getting chased out of because there are some hospitals that I worked in that they would chase people out of the waiting area. And so they'd be like, okay, so I'm sick now. And I go, check my blood pressure. It's always high, right? Blood pressure's always high. Oh, got to bring you in, right? You got 200 over 110, but that's their standard blood pressure. So people know how to do these things. But when we are in a position where we're not feeling safe, we're feeling like there's hurt, harm, loss, deficit, injury, death, pain coming in, we're at the poverty line all the time. And I really invite people to remove the idea of poverty as in having no money. It's not just about money. It's about resources. And if you know how to resource yourself, you are never impoverished. If you know how to get the environment to support you, you are never impoverished. You are always at the poverty line, right? At the safety line or above it. And when you get above that, you can move into a space where you connect with things. And that's actually moving into a luxury space.
Well, and we know people that make millions of dollars in the 7-8 figures, millions of dollars, who have never felt safe.
Never.
And that's because they got forced into jobs and roles and positions because of family, because of expectation, and the pressure just destroyed their health. The majority of our clients from like 2018 to 2021 were like 7-8 figure people who had a health crash between the ages of 36, 38, and 48 was the most common. And they ended up having to integrate their wealth to get their health back because all that pressure, not only to perform, but then you have all these people whose livelihood is on you. If you're not successful, it's not just you not being able to eat, it's whole families that are now your responsibility. So then if the market changes, the economy goes slow, crypto crashes, whatever it is, depending on the person we worked with, they didn't feel safe because of that added pressure. So financially, emotionally, what would people think? I'd have to fire people, let them go. And it's not something that I ever considered until we started to work with people when we were doing more private client work, that they weren't feeling safe, or business partners or relationships. How many couples did we work with where they didn't feel safe together? And not in every way, but in certain ways. And that was in the way of them really getting intimate.
Yep. Safety is an individual sport that you can play on a team. And it's very individualized. And so poverty is a very individualized space. I know people who don't have any money, who have nothing, who are coasting and they're golden. And there are plenty of countries where people have what they need. They just have what they need. And they don't have a bunch of technology. But they're whole within themselves.
Yeah.
And they don't see a deficit or perceive a deficit or anything like that until they're taught something different. And when they're taught something different, they have a new context. And since they have a new context and a new meaning, they create value around the meaning. And then the meaning is applied to safety. And that's part of what's going on in our world is there are more than just physiological safe spaces and unsafe spaces. There are ideological spaces. That means they're based on ideas. And if I have an idea that my kids are not safe, I'm never going to feel safe. If I have an idea that my money's not safe, then I'm not going to perceive safety. And I'm going to be at the poverty line no matter how much money, no matter how much the numbers are in my bank account. If I feel like if I'm Scrooge McDuck, I felt terrible for Scrooge McDuck. Scrooge McDuck was afraid. And what's this dude's name? Not Marley. Ebenezer Scrooge.
Oh.
Ebenezer Scrooge. This dude was terrified that his money was going to be taken away, and he's putting one coal in the fire. He's terrified. He's at the poverty line, but he has all this money. It doesn't line up. And so if this person has no idea what safety is for him, then how could he get safe? And this is part of what we talk about at the Condor approach, y'all, is being able to be vulnerable with yourself. Open up yourself to look inside yourself and see what is stopping you from feeling whole, stopping you from perceiving that you're whole. What's in the way?
Well, and it's at the live event that people start to actually understand safety. We can sit and teach this as a concept all we want to, but this information is not knowledge until people can actually feel it and see it in real time.
Mm-hmm.
And so the one great example of that was when it was February last year. And on day one, all the white folks were sitting in the front of the room. All the black folks were sitting in the back of the room. And that was very noticeable.
Mm-hmm.
But then we had some conversations around racism and the separation of being a racist versus racism working through your physical body.
Mm-hmm.
And there was some pretty heavy conversations that happened. On the next day, when we came into the room, all the white folks were in the back of the room. And part of that was because the intensity of what they experienced on almost like the violence on their idea of themselves as not being a racist. And then suddenly seeing how racism works as a system and as a construct.
Mm-hmm.
And to confront that is a lot to be with. And so your ideas of yourself come into question because of the conversations that when you're brave enough to confront them and to confront your possibly being shown some things that are a little tricky and sticky about yourself, changing your perspective, allowing other perspectives to be seen and feel when you don't feel safe.
Mm-hmm.
And it takes being in that contrast of one, knowing physically you're very safe and how quickly you can go from safe to not safe in the drop of a bucket.
Yep.
It happens to us at live events. Anyone that's been has witnessed it where I didn't feel safe or you didn't feel safe. And we choose to navigate it in real time. Because if we are not safe, then that's the entire container of the event.
Yep.
Because they're going to feel that we're not safe.
Yep.
And whether they're aware of it or not, for us, it is our responsibility. If we're creating this container of safety, it has to start with us and our team.
But this is the thing, is to be the example in this space.
Yes.
If you don't feel safe, then you're not going to be clear and your emotions are going to be running in the background. And to sit there and be in a presentation space does not make you safe. It's a presentation. And so you're teaching at the poverty line. And so your ability to access information clearly, your ability to teach clearly is going to be challenged. And I don't care what guru, what mentor, what teacher comes to you and tells you that they can teach as clear as possible when they're not safe. I don't believe them. This is not something I want to see it.
Yeah.
And if they are able to teach well in a stress or an unsafe space, imagine what they could do when the stress is gone from that unsafe position. And there's nothing you can do to convince me. Here's
the thing, Tah. Then it's not, how can it be safe? Because usually then there's a level of dissociation or compartmentalization that makes it so they can still operate under that pressure. But listen, I have worked in events with celebrities and big names and all of this stuff. And it was nauseating to see people come off stage, flip the switch, and treat the people behind the curtain like crap. And they didn't feel safe. So even if that person on stage can hold it together, that was something that was so palatable to me to be somewhere where I didn't watch what the guru, mentor, teacher, person, celebrity, whoever, I didn't care what they did on stage. It's when they were off stage. And as someone that worked in the service industry, that worked as a bartender and a hostess and a waitress and every role within that field, I worked it, busboy, bus person. It was how people treated service. It was how people treated the team. And on day one, when we come together at Condor, step one is like, how is everyone? How are you feeling? If something changes, if you don't feel safe, if you need support, if you need to go take a nap, because we are 5 days in this room together of 12, 14-hour days. If you need to go rest, come let us know. We got you. And that level of transparency allows us to communicate to each other so that when we don't feel safe, that's the thing. We're all going to have a moment where we don't feel safe, whether it's I didn't eat enough, my body doesn't feel safe, I'm not hydrated. Those are all the levels that when we started teaching that to the people supporting us in the event, then we're keeping an eye on each other. We're not just like, one, everyone has radical responsibility for themselves and their own safety, and we know how to watch for each other to check in, because I know when you're not safe. Like I now know the cues, and we've worked out languaging. We know how to work with each other, and I know you got you. You don't need me. I'm there as backup. I'm there for support. And it is my intention, and we're already doing it, but to continue to inspire this cohesion and transparency for anyone running events and retreats. Because a lot of the big retreat centers, their staff is getting sent to us because they are exhausted and they're not safe. They don't feel like they can share honestly their perspective, or people come to us to tell us about how a facilitator wronged them, but they never even told the facilitator.
That's an issue.
I know.
That's an issue.
There's got to be people that did it to us too, Tah, that didn't feel safe, never came back and told us.
I'm certain of it.
Yeah,
I'm certain of it. And then I hear something about it
later on.
And then I bring it to their attention. I'm like, hey, I heard that you didn't feel safe here. Tell me what's going on.
Yep.
And so we can have the conversation. I'm down for an uncomfortable conversation.
Me too.
And this is how we support each other in opening up into different spaces. And as a person who's a leader of communities and groups and all this stuff, I need to know if I am providing an environment that has holes in it. I need to know that so that I can shift and change and grow, because we're all growing.
Well, and a lot of the containers, I feel like we as facilitators, retreat runners, event folk, whatever you want to call us, if we only promote like anonymous feedback, we're supporting, not confronting the problems. Like this torch and pitchfork thing that's happening a lot in the coaching space and in the shamanic, and this is going to 10x. Some people are going to be so excited to have new things to get activated over, and it's going to be in the psychedelic space and in the coaching space. And this is all, here's the problem is, when we don't empower people to speak up when they didn't feel safe, like when someone comes to us now and says, oh, this facilitator hurt me, you know how often they went back to the same container and never said anything?
Never said a word.
Never said anything. And we chose to draw a boundary and say, yeah, I'll go sit with you and have the conversation, but I'm not going to be here for you to just sit and talk about how terrible this person was that you never told them. So if you're going to come and get support from me for this quote unquote terrible thing or person or whatever, then we need to have a conversation with them and you, and we're here, we're going to moderate and mediate and have the conversation, because it's important for them to know. And I had people come to me and be like, well, can you go talk to them? I'm like, no.
We can go talk to them.
We can go talk to them. But me, no, because I feel like people are trying to get around the confrontation, which is the problem in their life, is they're looking for someone else to rescue them or save them or be mommy or daddy to go rescue them.
That's the thing. And I'm not. And that's
not me.
That's the OTT though. That's something we teach at the Condor Approach too. It's
not me.
The oppression trap triangle. Don't do it. Don't get yourself trapped in the OTT, because then you're doing all this stuff to fortify the same dynamic of hiding. And we've got to step into a brave new world. If we're going to step into a brave new world, we have to be courageous. This work that we're doing, what we're talking about here, is courageous work. And I'm not afraid to be called on my stuff.
I have been.
If I'm not, listen, if I'm,
Continue to be.
and this is something that we had on our team meeting today. It's like, hey, listen, if you see me out of integrity with what you feel is what I like I say, I'm going to show up for this in this way. And if you see something that doesn't feel aligned, I want to know about it. Let me know that this isn't aligned. And I don't need you to protect my feelings. I don't want you to protect my feelings. Let me have my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
And I want you to be able to know that my feelings and my expression is a safe space that you can go to just be you and just say, I ask that you don't hit me. I ask that you don't break my stuff. I ask that you don't set my house on fire, but let's talk about it. And let's come to some mutuality in this space, because my greatest dream is for all of us to have everything that we need. And if you're not getting the safety that you need, then how can I support you in creating safety for yourself?
Yep. And it's a little disheartening at times when I've attempted to lean in and have the tough conversations and people won't do it. It's either, oh, well, it's just going to be excuses, or they have too much hurt, or their inability to confront things because they either get emotionally flooded, they don't have the capacity, they don't feel safe with their own emotions about whatever they think I did or didn't do or whatever. And for me, there's been times I just wanted to throw in the towel, because I'm like, if you can't talk to me and you're a facilitator, if we can't sit down and have a conversation, like, what hope is there for humanity if we're supposed to be the ones bridging these tough conversations that are going to come up in this field? Yep. Then who will? And I got to tell you, like 2 years ago, I was just like, if I can't sit and have a conversation with a facilitator around some stuff, then we're all screwed. You know what I mean?
We're out of luck, man.
And the recognition that everyone's on their own path. And I think that anyone that wants to come into this field, it's knowing that this comes with it too. That sometimes you're going to be someone's villain, sometimes you're going to be someone's hero. And this is, come to the Condor approach, y'all. Learn about these dynamics, because a lot of them you can spot ahead of time and know how to have these conversations around safety, because safety is only a moment of now thing. So I could feel safe right now and not safe 2 seconds from now. And if you're coaching someone and you say, you're safe, and they just say, okay, I'm safe, but they don't believe it, or they don't actually experience it in their body, it's not authentic. It might be genuine that they desire to feel safe, or that they know intellectually, like a bear's not going to jump out because there's no bears where they live, but that doesn't mean they feel safe financially. It doesn't mean they feel safe spiritually. It doesn't mean that they feel safe in their gender role, in their gender dynamic, in their relationship, their role as a parent. How many times did we sit with a parent who finally just needed to say out loud, sometimes I wish I wasn't a parent? And without having it go to shame or guilt around their children, because they do love their children, but that there was a lack of safety around their thoughts and feelings. And not because they were wishing they weren't parents, but sometimes they wish they weren't.
Listen, I'd be the first person to admit it. There's plenty of times I was like, I wish I wasn't a parent. I didn't want to be a parent. I didn't sign up for this. All of these things. And I spoke to my daughter about it. Mm-hmm. And I said, hey, listen, I got to be honest with you. When you were a kid, I didn't want to be a parent. And I love you. And I leaned into the responsibility and all of that. I didn't want to be a parent. I was 18. I didn't know what I was doing. And my daughter told me, I feel that way all the time. We had a great conversation about it. But I got to be honest about my stuff, man. Like, I have to. And when I'm honest, right, when I'm open with possibility, because somebody could judge me. Yeah. Somebody could not talk to me. My daughter could have been like, oh, that's how it was. I'm not talking to you anymore. Yeah. I open myself up with possibility. But I've provided myself in an environment with my daughter where she can talk to me about anything. I can talk to her about anything. And this is what I discussed before that conversation ever happened. It's like, look, can I tell you anything? Even if it's scary, even if it feels funky, even if it feels like you have questions about my love, can I discuss that with you? We have these conversations, mm-hmm. me and you. Mm-hmm. And to be able to have that kind of openness with possibility, and to be able to see in my nervous system that I'm not going to be rejected. I have a lot of abandonment issues from my childhood that I'm still sorting through. And so sometimes I have to come to you and be like, hey, listen, I have something I want to share. I'm afraid you're going to leave me. I'm afraid. I have these feelings in my body and these thoughts like you're going to leave me, like this is going to be it, like I'm going to get left alone. And you say, that's not what's going to happen. What's going on? And I have to actually be courageous enough to share it with you. And as my nervous system learns that you're a safe space for me to fully express, I get to actually craft safety for myself in this space. But you are not making me safe. You're creating an environment for me to be safe.
Well, and this is where knowing my own safety is so critical, because I have to understand that if I start to feel a certain way about what you're expressing, old versions of me in past relationships, if someone was like, I feel like you're going to leave, I'm like, how many times do I have to tell you? I'm not going to leave, because I was taking it as an attack on my own identity of being a loyal person and I'm not going anywhere, or you don't believe me, or whatever. And so by me recognizing if something comes up, if you express it, it's me noticing like, oh, I'm not feeling safe in my own identity or my own ideas, or I'm not feeling safe like he trusts me, right? Like I'm not feeling safe. And by understanding how and where that expresses in my own body, it makes it where we can like clear the lines so much faster and so much more effectively to get back into connection and to get back into love and back into fun. Because when we have fun, everything is better. What?
Back into safety, back into fun, back into...
that too. But that's the other thing. I'm glad you... because how many times did we work with couples where the male in the... we'll say the man that has... we'll say the person with a penis, okay? That had erectile dysfunction, and what it really was is they didn't feel safe.
They were not safe.
Either they felt like it's performative, like I have to do a good job, so they weren't safe in their ideas of their performance with their partner or pleasing their partner. Maybe they weren't safe in their finances. Maybe they weren't safe in their sexuality. They didn't feel like doing that, or they had shame because of religious background. Like safety, people talk about trauma a lot. And for us, we talk about trauma being the response you have, or what happens in your body as a response to something. And so the nervous system, your body, when it gets activated, which could be fight, flight, freeze, fawn, or basically when someone gets stressed, to simplify, the first things to go is your reproductive function.
It's not necessary.
Right, because your primal instincts say that we do not need to procreate in this environment. This is not a priority for survival. So it's going to start shutting it down to survive.
That's right. Yep, right with digestion. Most of the people I know who have erectile dysfunction, chances are they have some digestive issues as well.
IBS.
Because they're in a space where their nervous system is running on full blast.
Yeah.
And they can't have sexual situations. They don't even get horny, right? It's like, I want to have sex, but I'm not horny.
It's not even there.
They can't have an erection, right? The female bodies are dry and contracted. There's no arousal at all.
So much like hip issues. When I was doing the Women's Womb Healing Summit back in, 2018? Tah, I had like 6,000 women register, and it was crazy how many had hip issues. And it's because they were still unsafe, whether in their relationship dynamic or they didn't have a relationship, so they were unsafe in their future ideas of fertility. So there was that fear, or they were feeling unsafe, just the amount of ways that it was always some complex, complicated matrix of emotions and situations and responses. And until you start to pull apart the layers, it's not a one and done situation. And when people bring this idea to psychedelics, like, I'm just going to have one experience, and it's like 10 years of therapy. And I'm like, first of all, I needed 45 years of therapy. Okay, so cool. Even if one night got me 10, there was another 35 to back it up, because everyone's not the same. And you could feel safe at the retreat, but then you go home and you're not safe. So then you've got to go back to the retreat and back to that community. So then people can become codependent on the safety of the acceptance they get in a psychedelic community or meditation community or yoga community or the gym. So then they have to avoid home. I did that with Bikram yoga, which is a oxymoron now, given everything I know about Bikram now. But that studio was the only place I felt safe at that point in my life. So I was like, I'm getting my body in shape. No, I was avoiding where I didn't feel safe in my first marriage at home. And that studio was like, I would go clean the mirrors late at night because I was safe there. But it's like, it took me a while to recognize, until I saw the pattern, that I keep going and cleaning a yoga studio at like 2 o'clock in the morning or 4 o'clock in the morning because it had to be done before the first class because I felt safer there at night. And when I look back on that, and even when I realized it then, it was just like, what is happening to me? Like, I don't feel safe at home. I was taking Ambien to go to sleep. I was drinking wine. I was doing all these things to try to sleep, thinking I had a sleep issue. I had a safety issue, emotionally, physically, spiritually, sexually, in every way. And so Ambien wasn't knocking me out. My body wasn't safe. It would not even allow me to go to sleep. I love you.
I love you. Thank you for sharing so openly. Thank you for, I just want to breathe into that for a second. Thank you for being open to share that. You don't have to share these things. Thank you for creating a space where you can be safe enough to speak this with me and an environment and an audience that can actually hold space for you. Thanks, y'all, for holding a space for Kole to share. This is part of it.
Yeah, and I think that when we talk about how people get treatment in the day-to-day world, victims of domestic violence and all these other things, but when you start to learn the 7 attributes of violence, it starts to make a lot more sense why a lot of people operate the way that they do, even if they never had a partner that hit them or a parent that hit them. You start to understand how someone can be emotionally harmed. You start to understand how they can have deficit of love or of quality time or of human touch. Or if you look at a post-COVID world now, people they were isolated, so they had a deficit of connection. And a lot of folks now have fear. Like, they have a physical, behavioral, conditioned response to being around people. When I watch like young kids that can't even get close to people because they were raised in that kind of era of isolation, where their physical body perceives all people getting close as a threat, even though they were never touched, even though nothing, quote unquote, happened. And the amount of folks that we worked with that came to us saying, well, I didn't have any trauma. Oh, nothing really happened to me. Until we break down the 7 attributes of violence, until someone starts to understand how intricate safety is. When I hear, and I appreciate it, but when I hear men talk about, and I'm just going to use the very heteronormative languaging here for simplicity, or really just for my own experience, when a man would tell me, I'll keep you safe. From what? Or maybe then it would confuse me because I wouldn't feel safe. They're maybe keeping me safe from physical harm from other people, but especially because of my trauma in my teens in particular, I would end up with men who would want to keep me safe from any other harm. But quite often I would either attract someone that was overly protective or jealous, which created other harm in either my ideas are not being trusted or whatever. But it's like I couldn't put my finger on it of like, why don't I feel safe? They would never hit me. They would never touch me. They would never do anything like that. But I did not feel safe.
How could you? How could you? When your idea of who you are as a person is being threatened, when your freedom of speech is being threatened, like, so many people would be like, well, you have this and you have this. But if you can't speak your truth, who you are is threatened.
Or your information.
Your expression. And this is the thing, right? We have ideas, we have property, we have our bodies, but we also have our expression. If I cannot feel free to express myself and I have to stifle that and hold it in, if my expression gets out and I get attacked for it, if my expression is shamed, that's a space where I don't feel whole with my expression. I don't feel able to be whole with my full expression or my body movement. etiquette is one of the things that I feel is one of the biggest threats to people's freedom in this world is etiquette. Hold your fork this way, stand up this way, do it this way.
At church,
and
bow your head,
bow your
fold
head,
your arms.
be reverent, all of these different things. When we have etiquette spaces, people get forced into a particular style of holding back who they are. And when they hold back who they are, what?
Well, no, it just reminds me how you always eat with your hands. And like we were at a fancy restaurant tonight and the chick kept trying to hand you a fork. And we're like, no, he doesn't need a fork. He eats with her hands, with his hands. She did not understand.
She was like, what?
Oh, because you're getting a burger? No, like
No, I eat with my hands.
Bring him the rigatoni. He's gonna eat.
I'm eating it with my hands. Like I'm eating with my. People.
Oh, they get so triggered.
People have no idea how to handle that.
Yeah.
But it's my expression. It's how I eat. It's how I connect with my food. And if my connection with my food gets interrupted, then something's not safe. Like how I eat is not safe. Oh, it's a problem for you, right? How I eat is a problem for your eyes. So I must condition myself to fortify you with safety of how you see things. And so instead of us coming to a mutuality, hey, listen, I don't like watching you eat. Okay, can we move? Hey, garçon, waiter, can you move us to a different space so this person doesn't have to watch me use my hands? And it's simply solved just like that.
But think about how funny, like she didn't understand why you'd like eat rigatoni or whatever the pasta dish was with your hands, but then you go get a burger that you eat with your hands. But it's just funny, people's context, right? Is this idea of like, no, this have fork, this no fork. Hamburger should be a hand burger. But that's a story for another day.
A hand burger. I love you so much, girl. Come on now. Because a hamburger. Yeah, that makes plenty of sense. Right? And it's not ham.
No. So none of this makes any. Why is it even called hamburger?
Listen, but the thing is, and
my safety is now compromised because I want a hand burger.
And the thing is, all of this is, right, we put meaning on things and then we assign a value to the meaning. And if the meaning gets disrupted, that's when we have a space for potential confrontation that can lead into conflict. If my presentation is disrupting your value and your peace of mind and how you see things, you may want to disrupt me to make you have your easy space. And so your space, it's like some people are offended by the clothes that other people wear. People are.
I am. I'm offended by all the clothes you wear.
Listen, I'm offended that I'll get locked up if I'm naked. Where do we draw the line? And how do we get into a space where we can be accepting of one another and lean into that? And it starts with the dialogue. But even before the dialogue, it's actually knowing where a person is and knowing what's driving the unsafe feeling. What's driving? If a person is, when people come to me, I have anger issues. You have safety issues. You don't have anger issues. You have safety issues. What's unsafe? And every time somebody sits with me and they tell me they went to anger management and I talk about what anger management is, it's the quelling of your anger. It's not really finding a safe space for yourself. It's
controlling the behavior.
It's controlling the behaviors that are pegged as angry, right? Oh, you're acting out, you're yelling at people, you're throwing stuff around, you're breaking objects. This needs to be managed. When it's not, your anger doesn't need to be managed. Your safety needs to be situated so that you don't need to. When a person is not unsafe, there's no reason for anger. And if the person is still angry, if a person needs to lash out about something, there is something that's not safe. Well, I'm mad at that person because they looked at me funny. Well, if they looked at you funny, what was threatened? Yeah. Well, maybe they were thinking this about me. Maybe you have all these ideas that stop you from feeling safe. This is the thing. When I have clients that come and sit with me and I don't understand why I'm so angry at my wife. I don't understand why I'm so angry at my husband. Let's pull it apart. And we sit there and we pull it apart. I don't understand. I had one person tell me they were so angry at their kids, Kole. I'm so angry at my kid. I'm so angry at my kid. Well, what about your kid is not making you say, well, it's a kid. How can my kid not make me feel safe? Well, is your convenience threatened? And they were like, oh. Yeah, well, I can't stand getting up at this time. I can't stand when my kid keeps dropping things on the floor. They're always late. They're not showing up fast enough.
They don't go to bed. They don't sleep all night.
Your convenience is threatened. And if your convenience is threatened, something's not safe about you. And people will push it off. Well, you know what? My convenience is not important. I don't agree. Your convenience is important or it wouldn't be your convenience. And not saying that you need to have convenience all the time. And if you deny your convenience, if you deny what makes you feel whole, then you're denying a part of yourself and you're denying yourself safety. This is part of it. We don't have to act on it, but when we know what it is, we can actively address it and we can bring it to the table. Hey, listen, I have one of our coaches has had an issue with their kid, and it was all this stuff, and my kid keeps doing these things, and I'm like, what's going on? Well, I don't know. I'm so angry. What's not safe? Well, my time. Boom. Your time is being threatened. So tell me about your time. Well, I want to be able to do this and I want to be able to do this, but my kid keeps doing this and this.
Mm-hmm.
This is a convenience situation, and your time is important. And if you deny that your time is important, if you say your kid is more important than your time, there's the value, the dynamic that I'm talking about that creates conflict. That's it. We have to look at these things and peel them apart. If we don't have to, but you have the option to look at them and peel them apart so that you can analyze it and get the environment to support you.
Yes, exactly. The key thing here is the self-awareness is what sets you free, not being safe in every possible way. By me having awareness and radical self-responsibility for knowing about my safety and where I am, if I come home and I'm a little bit off and I feel you can feel something going on and I say, hey, baby, I just want to let you know I'm just not really feeling safe today because X, Y, and Z happened and this is what's going on. I just want you to know that it's not you. You can let yourself off the hook and not become the story writer of what's wrong with Kole. Why is she being cold to me? What's going on? She's feeling unsafe. I'm making her feel unsafe, or she doesn't feel safe with me. And that's a very common dynamic when you're talking about like a heteronormative relationship dynamic, man-woman relationship dynamic of what men have been taught is a men thing to do or a way to behave. That whether or not you deconstruct it, if your ideas of a man, because you've been told that men are protectors and you have to keep your wife safe, and I'm not perceiving safety, that it's your fault or my safety is your responsibility versus creating an environment for me to elicit and create and understand that safety. Mm-hmm. But by having that level of honesty and transparency with each other, then I can say, cool, so if I'm exhibiting these behaviors, like we have one thing, if I shut down, don't try to, if I shut down to actually start to play with my hair, not talk. Because when I emotionally shut down, I'm not able to communicate that way. I'm not able to talk that way. And so we came up with languaging and cues that if I shut down because I'm not feeling safe, whether it's my ideas or overwhelm or whatever it might be, by us having this conversation and me knowing my safety, the level one of me being triggered is you ask me, hey, baby, is there anything that you need right now? But that's when I'm just on the beginning of it, right? The beginning of this kind of like trauma trail, I'll call it. The first initial kind of like trip over the wire a little bit. The next layer deep of that is if I'm not able to answer, you'll give me 3 options that we came up with. If I'm not able to answer that, then you come sit with me. You don't say anything and you play with my hair because I'm not able to verbalize, because that's how far my safety has been compromised within myself. And it doesn't matter what it is. Our first goal is to get me back to where I can find that safety within myself. If I need space, I can tell you, whatever the case may be. But this is something that we had to develop. And I think that for anyone that's listening, if you're going like, oh my gosh, I just need to be safe, it's actually, no, what do you do when you don't feel safe? Mm-hmm. What do you do, or what do you start doing, or what do you stop doing? How can you get your environment to support you if you are to feel safe, or when you're not feeling safe, how it can support you in that way? And that's what's game changing for Condor, I think. People at the live event, the first time Sincere 7 came, or not the first time, at the second, that big event last year in February. I think he's been like 7 times now, whatever. Sincere 7, perfect. Now he's even Condor 7. But one of the things, he stood up in the room and he said, because he had a lot of folks there for their first time at Condor, and he said, I want y'all to know that this is the first place I've ever come that I could lay down in the middle of the floor and go to sleep because of how safe I feel. And that's coming from someone that served in the military. has a lot of other background and situational things that could make someone not feel safe in a group of people. And to me, those were the moments I started to go, this is what we teach. Not just the lessons, not just that safety is freedom from hurt, harm, loss, deficit, injury, death, pain, but that safety is a momentary thing. That in loving you, I'm watching what does your body do or stop doing when you don't feel safe. And when you do feel safe, I know when a deep breath comes that you have arrived back to some level of safety within yourself. And these cues people are missing. These cues are like these magical nuanced things that you could do 1,000 psychedelic experiences alone. But until you're with people, until you're with community, so many of us were harmed by community in some level. And so for me, this deeper level of healing requires community, for us to know ourselves, for us to recognize when we feel safe, when we don't feel safe, having the tools or knowing when to use the tools. And I think that's been the most rewarding part. You know, the concepts are cool, but for people to really understand that if there's no safety, there's nowhere to go.
It's the only way to go. It's the only way. It's the only place to go. And I've had people come to me, Kole, thank you for sharing that. I've had people come to me and say, y'all talk a lot about safety, but what if somebody's trapped in a house with somebody who's beating on them and can't let them get out and they're held hostage? The person's not safe. Now, I don't know how to get them out of there. Well, do we call the police to bust in? Maybe. And if the police bust in and the person goes to jail, when they get out of jail, that person's still not going to feel safe. What do we do? How do we get this person to a space of fortification? Then I've had other people say, well, there are whole countries that are being bombed and all of these things that are happening, which are quite realities. And I'm saying that if there's an angry government that's attacking somebody, the government doesn't feel safe. Well, how can they not feel safe if they have all the guns and militia? Well, why would they need to go and take and destroy something if they felt safe in the first place? Mm-hmm. And anybody who is safe with who they are and they feel whole and they have everything, why would they need to take or destroy anything else? They wouldn't. But there's something inside, there's something happening with tyranny. There's something, and this is on all levels. And I'm not talking about major wars and holocausts only. I'm talking about tyranny in a household, tyranny in a job place, tyranny in the street, in the supermarket,
in the subway,
and tyranny by police. All of these things are tyrannical. And anytime there's a tyrannical space, someone is not safe. And they need to impart their will on someone else in order for them to feel safe. Somebody's power may feel threatened. And if your power is not safe, you will attack someone else to make sure that they know that you have power. And that's how you attain your safety. I'm not saying it's the highest functional space, but it is a space where a person doesn't feel safe. I don't know anybody who's a tyrant. I know plenty of people who are tyrants, but I don't know anybody who I know that is tyrannical that's not always looking over their shoulder. Mm-hmm. They're always looking over their shoulder. I don't know anybody who's stealing stuff, who has stolen stuff or who has embezzled things or anything, who's not always looking over their shoulder. They never feel safe. Yeah. These are safety issues. And when we look at our world, when we look at the cultures in our world, they talk about we're in a cancel culture. Yeah, we're in a cancel culture because people are feeling victimized. And when people claim victim, we're in a culture where people don't feel safe. Victims are not safe people. Mm-hmm. I'm a victim of this. I'm a victim of circumstance. I'm a victim of these people. I'm a victim of this government. I'm a victim of the IRS. I'm a victim of my parents. I'm a victim of my spouse. This is a space where people don't feel safe. And they're trapped in that triangle. And they're looking for a hero to get them out of that space.
Well, and this is where I think a lot of people don't even understand where they don't feel safe. Like, when I'll sit and observe certain dialogue where it's like we have friends that are Israeli, we have friends that are Jewish, we have friends that are Palestinian, we have friends that are of Arab backgrounds, we have people from Egypt, like we have so many friends, Muslim, you name it, and to hear all the varying perspectives while still observing that the body doesn't feel safe. Someone could be Palestinian and not feel safe even though they're in the United States and all of their families not in Palestine anymore, but they could still feel unsafe as a Palestinian person in observation of the people that are still in Gaza.
Yeah.
And so it's like, until you start to pull apart and understand all the pieces and parts and get yourself to be regulated, you can't communicate the same way effectively to get done the things that need to get done, whether it's raising money, whether it's bridging conversations, whether it's whatever it is a requirement in communication. And for me, whether we call it manipulation or communication, it's the same thing. If you want a different result and a different outcome, your safety becomes your responsibility, assuming you're above that poverty line or assuming you're in most places in the United States. And probably if you're listening to this podcast, you have enough awareness to start to understand and deconstruct these layers so that you can access more of your brain. Because you literally, when you get stressed, just like we talked about, your reproductive organs and your reproductive system shuts down. And same with so many people we know with PMDD and endometriosis and all that stuff too. They don't feel safe or haven't most of their life. So does the brain. You lose access to the conscious, imaginative, comprehensive possibilities of the brain. Like we say, there's no limited states, only limited strategies, because at the end of the day, it is not all, there are always exceptions, but we've watched people overcome the most insane circumstances because they found a way to understand where they could create safety, get more clarity, get their body relaxed so that they could think. Because part of how you control a people is keeping them stressed out and keeping them not feeling safe, and then you can sell them safety. Locks for your doors. Oh, you're afraid of losing your key? Well, then you'd be unsafe in getting in your house. So we're going to do a digital lock, right? So I'm going to sell you what the fear of being unsafe, of losing your house key, and you can't get in your house and there's burglars outside. So I'm going to sell you this kind of lock. Or you need to lose weight so that you feel safe, you can get a partner. Or like that, we literally get manipulated because we don't feel safe.
Right.
That is like the baseline of how you sell to people is make them not feel safe, sell the antidote.
Yeah, you show them.
But it's not really.
You show them things that they can't change.
Yeah.
Right? Show them things that they can't change, and you give them a remedy for that. Right? You show them things that are irrelevant, and
make them feel out of control and out of power.
And you show them that they're not safe in that space, and you sell them remedies for that. This is part of capitalism, and I'm not mad at capitalism for doing what capitalism does. It's capitalism, and if you're going to be a sovereign person, you've got to start understanding where your safety lines are and how to craft that for yourself. And like you said, there are no limited human beings. There are only limited states of being and limiting strategies to create those limited states. And that's where we are with things in our world right now, is we have a bunch of people that perceive that they don't have hope. Where there's a bunch of people that perceive that they are going to be unsafe, and that's the limit of it. And they have to outsource to a church or a government or a person or a corporation.
A nonprofit group.
Or some consumer gadget or some technology that's going to keep them safe.
Or to the top 1%. How often do we hear people say, like, the rich people should pay for it? And it's like, would that actually feel safer to you to be provided for by the people you already perceive created this stuff? At some level, until you start to peel back these layers and understand safety, understand when you don't feel safe, understand that when you are only reactive, when you are only having conflict, you're not feeling safe. You are still being manipulated by the same system you're trying to break down, change, take down, whatever it is.
This whole technological movements right now that are built on creating off-planet circumstances because they're banking on the planet falling apart, and they have no hope for humanity shifting into something different. Yeah. And so we're building rocket ships, we're building technology to get us to Mars and to colonize Mars and do all of these other things. And we're not investing the money or the time or the resources in supporting each other to create an environment where I feel whole. If I am whole, I don't need to take anything from you. There's nothing I need to disrupt or destroy about you. And if we are all in a space where we are whole, where we have enough water, we have enough clean water, we have food, we have resources, we have a place to live, then why do we need to defeat one another? We don't. But this dynamic that we've built into our consumeristic societies has become king. Cash is king right now. And so we build deficit into the space where if we don't have enough, we don't feel safe. We feel below the poverty line. This is the space where conversations like this that we're having right now, the conversations we have with the Condor approach, are really important in getting people to start to understand that this deficit of health, this deficit of wellness, the deficit of having a place to live, of having food, of having a job, of having money, all of these things are driving people to not feel whole and not feel safe. And so what do we need to do so that we can reconfigure society around safety?
So tell me, what is step one? I feel like a lot of people talk about the big picture of what humanity needs to do, but let's talk about, for the person listening right now, what is step one? And then once step one, right? The person listening, they're going to do step one. Then they're going to come back and ask us some possibilities for step two, because this is not doctrine. We're speaking from our experience, and we've learned some things.
Mm-hmm.
So for the person listening right now, Tah, what is step one? What do you invite for them to explore to find safety so that they can even start to see the bigger picture, what we call the Condor approach, the bird's eye view,
Sure.
to start to change things in their own environment?
Sure. Step one is to get a pencil and paper, or a pen and paper, or your iPad and your Apple Pencil,
The workbook.
or the Condor workbook.
We're going to make you a workbook. Here's the deal, y'all. I'm going to put a workbook in the show notes here for you. So, yeah, we're going to start doing workbooks for y'all.
So the first thing I want you to do is write down the 7 attributes of violence: hurt, harm, loss, deficit, injury, death, and pain. Write them all down. Where do I feel hurt? Where do I feel like there is harm happening? Okay. I can be hurt without being harmed. And a lot of times harm comes from physical harm, the harm of a reputation and that type of situation. Feeling hurt is the actual perception of being disrupted. Okay. And so do I feel hurt? I feel hurt when my partner says this. I feel hurt when this happens. I feel hurt. Is there any harm happening? Well, my bank account is being harmed when this happens. When I drink too much, this is happening. Where are all the spaces that I'm feeling hurt, harm, loss? Am I experiencing loss right now? Is my crypto account decreasing? Is somebody dipping their hands in my bank account? Am I in a space of loss? Is one of my friends dying right now? I had a friend pass in January. We had a Condor coach pass last month. And so there's a loss space that we have to navigate through, and our community became disrupted. And so we had to do some patchwork to bring things into a different space of wholeness. Am I in a space of hurt, harm, loss, deficit? Do I not have enough? Do I not have enough food? Do I not have enough money? Can I pay my rent? Do I have the resources? Do I have enough whatever? Am I feeling like I'm not enough for my partner? Am I feeling like I'm not enough of a parent? All of these are deficit spaces. And if we can't see all of these deficit spaces, it's going to be challenging for us to feel safe. If I don't feel like I'm a whole parent for my kid, how can I feel like my kid is safe? And so I have safety situations here. Hurt, harm, loss, deficit, injury. Am I injured? Do I have any injuries? Do I have any pain in my back? What do I need to do to shore that up? What do I need to do? What can I do? Have I done the research around that? Do I have any injuries? Is my house injured? Is my car injured? Right? Is there a nail in my tire? Am I constantly worried because I don't have $20 to get my tire patched? What happens if I have a blowout or something on the highway? Is my property injured? Are my things injured? Are the people around me injured? Right? Death. Is there death? Is there imminent death? Is somebody dying? We're all on the path, right? Is there something that's happening? Not just a person that's dying. Is my job dying? Right? Is my relationship, am I in a relationship with a person, with a spouse, and that relationship is dying? Is that happening? Do I have all these things? And am I in pain? And physical pain is one type of pain, but there's also emotional pain. Mm-hmm. Am I in the pain of being around something or someone all the time? And this is where space you can sit down and you can actually look at these things for yourself. You can apply these to the people that are proximal to you. And is my wife having hurt? Is she feeling harm? Is she having loss, deficit, injury, death, pain? What about my kids? What about my animals? What about the things around me? Are the people that I work with, my employees, experiencing all of these things? And actually look around you and see what the safety dynamics are. So that's the step one. The step one is to understand the 7 attributes of violence. Just write them down: hurt, harm, loss, deficit, injury, death, pain. So you know them like the back of your hand, like we do. And then be able to see whenever I'm feeling out of sorts, if I get angry, I'm stop. I pause, I pull back, I do a physical scan of myself. Am I experiencing hurt? Am I experiencing harm, loss, deficit, injury, death, pain? I go through the whole thing and I pinpoint it, and then I create a strategy around it. But I don't want you to get into the strategy stuff right now. What I want you to do is to start to have awareness. And Kole's going to put a workbook in the show notes.
In the show notes.
So that you can download it and just get it and write these things down.
Yeah, this is phase 1 moving forward, y'all. So every week that you tune in, my intention, okay, so hold your 7 attributes of violence if I ever miss it for the hurt, harm, deficit, injury, loss, death, pain. But the intention is to have a workbook. So each and every week, or every 2 weeks, fam, we're talking about doing a deeper dive every 2 weeks. So 2 episodes a month. And look, if you love it, and we're getting lots of emails and y'all are responding, y'all are real quiet, okay? But I know that y'all are listening because we just went to Costco in Spanish Fork, Utah 2 weeks ago, and the chick that was running the door recognized our voice. So we know
that was crazy.
That was crazy. So, and that's not the first time, by the way, that we've gone into a store and someone recognized, well, me specifically, this is not the first time in that city. So we know people are listening. So like, y'all, can you, come on. So, anyway, if you saw the video, there was a whole situation that just happened. Workbook. All you have to do is drop your email. I'm going to give the link in there, put the email, and it's just a little reflective exercise workbook. So go get it. Explore safety, not of only your physical body, your emotions, your biome, right? Are the bugs in your body happy? Talk about your spirit, your religion, your family, your finances, like just every area of your life. Where is the hurt, harm, loss, deficit, death, injury, pain? I missed one.
Hurt. That was right. Hurt, harm, loss, deficit, injury, death, pain.
Yeah. What he said and I said. You will start to find that, wow, when I got reactive when that person said that, it's because I felt harm to my idea of myself. I felt hurt and harm from that comment. Then you can go to your partner and go, oh man, the reason that I was reactive today is because our finances, I wasn't feeling safe. Because with this bill, now we can't pay rent. And if we can't pay rent, we can't pay insurance. And when you start to have that awareness, it's not that you can just fix everything in life that's happening. That's not what this is about. It's not about finding safety in totality. It's recognizing, wow, I don't feel safe. That is where freedom starts to come from. So I hope that you love today's episode. If you really like this long form vibe and you like me and Tah being in this dialogue, in this conversation, please let us know in the reviews. Let us know what you like about it. Let other people know so that we can start to grow this show as part of our intention between the Facebook group and here, and really just increasing the deeper dialogue. It's something we do at the live events that we haven't been doing on the podcast in a while, and it's time. That's what people value the most.
Listen, and if you know someone, and I know someone who's not feeling safe, who you approximate is not feeling safe, just say, hey, I want you to listen to this podcast. Let them pay it forward, y'all. Mm-hmm. Share this with other people. If this has been helpful to you, chances are it's going to be helpful to somebody else.
And so you could dialogue about it. If you've got people in your life that you're recognizing this, y'all, listen to this together and then talk about it. Freedom is on the other side of awareness.
Please.
Okay? Yes.
Please share this with somebody, y'all. Share it with people share it with somebody that you love, and don't assume that somebody's safe. This could be a turning point for somebody to move into.
And for you and your relationships.
That's right. And when you're ready, come to the Condor Approach, y'all.
Yep.
We would love to have you there.
Stop playing. Stop sitting back,
really,
y'all.
Stop playing. Come
Stop back.
Why haven't you signed up? Come to the Condor Approach. It's super accessible. It's 3 days, and it'll be a game changer for you. Every time people come to it, it's a game-changing circumstance.
Until next time, be easy, be free. This is the Psychedelic Coach Podcast. My name is Kole Whitty.
My name is Tah.
And we hope to see you in Austin or in Utah very soon.
We use the methodology of the Condor approach to integrate things in our lives. It's a tool belt. You have all of these tools that you use on a day-to-day basis, and we move through a psychedelic informed lens because it works. And there are a lot of people that are leaning into utilizing psychedelics and they're not integrating with intention. Integration is something that's not optional, but it's something that's ongoing all the time. And if we don't do it with intention, we get what we get. So the question is, can you coach yourself and can you be coached by somebody else? From our vantage point at the Condor approach, coaching is eliciting greatness from another person. It is supporting another person, bringing out the greatness in them. And so if you can coach somebody else, can you coach yourself? Bring the greatness out of you. Be coachable and have fun. If you fall out of having fun, things can get really, really challenging. So bring yourself back to fun at every instance that you possibly can, y'all. The Condor approach is a methodology. This is not a law space, not a religion, not a cult. This is not a space of indoctrination. It is a methodology. And we use the methodology of the Condor approach to integrate things in our lives. It's a tool belt. You have all of these tools that you use on a day-to-day basis, and we move through a psychedelic informed lens because it works. And there are a lot of people that are leaning into utilizing psychedelics and they're not integrating with intention. Integration is something that's not optional, but it's something that's ongoing all the time. And if we don't do it with intention, we get what we get. So the question is, can you coach yourself and can you be coached by somebody else? From our vantage point at the Condor approach, coaching is eliciting greatness from another person. It is supporting another person, bringing out the greatness in them. And so if you can coach somebody else, can you coach yourself? Bring the greatness out of you. Be coachable and have fun. If you fall out of having fun, things can get really, really challenging. So bring yourself back to fun at every instance that you possibly can, y'all.